This podcast may contain themes that are unsuitable for some listeners. Please check the episode description for content warnings. A Court of Thorns and Roses, Chapter 3. The trampled snow coating the road into our village was speckled with brown and black from passing carts and horses. Elaine and Nesta clicked their tongues and grimaced as we made our way along it, dodging the particularly disgusting parts. I knew why they'd come. They'd taken one look at the hides I'd folded into my satchel and grabbed their cloaks.
I'm Ruth.
I'm Katie.
And welcome to A Court of Thoughts and Proses. This week we're going to be a story around the theme of storytelling. So we're going to hand you over to Katie for a very interesting story.
It's very meta to tell a story about storytelling in a book podcast.
Storytelling squared.
Right, so my story on storytelling is even more meta because it's a Cinderella story.
A Cinderella story on storytelling.
Exactly. So I've always loved fairy tales, and part of what attracted me to this book in particular is that it's kind of a retelling of Cinderella. It's got elements of Beauty and the Beast in there. Tamlin, one of the characters that we haven't met yet, but Will, who's the High Lord of the Spring Court, his name and part of his story is from a legendary ballad from Scotland, where he is rescued by his true love from the Queen of the Fairies, which we'll come on to later in the book. So it's fair to say that I really like fairy tales, and especially different versions of Cinderella. So I recently rewatched A Cinderella Story, the iconic 2004 film with Hilary Duff. And what I realised watching this story is that you can have too many versions of Cinderella, and it doesn't always need to be remade all the time for every single era and every single situation, and that you can get sick of it. And I think at the moment I've reached my Cinderella quota, and I need to take a break and go and read some other fairy tales and come back to it. The other thing that I realised watching A Cinderella Story is that the prince is horrible. The prince, who's like this jock character who plays football, he is rude, he is superficial, he watches Hilary Duff's character get bullied in front of him and called Diner Girl, chanted by the entire school, and does nothing. And this is a girl who he's been talking to for like a month online, and like formed this really deep and intimate relationship, and he's like, oh my god, I think I'm in love with you, da, 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 da. Age 17 or whatever, and he watches her get bullied and does nothing. And then obviously we have the iconic scene where she confronts him in his changing room and is like, you're a terrible person and I'm sick of waiting for you, because waiting for you is like waiting for a drought, waiting for rain in this drought, pointless and disappointing. Oh, such a good line. But then he changes his mind and is like, oh, actually, she's quite a cool girl, and kisses her and like wants to date her and goes to college with her. But he doesn't deserve her. He doesn't deserve her, and they shouldn't have got together. And the reason why I wanted to tell the story of A Cinderella Story is that we've referenced Tamlin in a couple of episodes, but we haven't really explained who he is, and he's going to appear in chapter 4. But the reason why this story came to mind is that Tamlin is the prince, effectively, of this book. He's the romantic lead, he's the person that Feyre falls in love with. But he's a terrible person. He's not a good person, and, spoilers for the second book, he's not who she ends up with. So we have this classic prince-princess story, but it doesn't always fit, and it doesn't always fit nuanced situations, and the situation changes, and the person that you thought was the prince isn't the prince and could actually be the villain. So the thing I want to think about is storytelling. Is storytelling lying? Or is it working out fundamental truths about human nature, about our relationships? Is it a way of working through those questions by telling fictional stories? Okay, can you tell me a story in your 30-second recap?
I don't think I can. I've forgotten how to read and I would like to leave. Thank you. Goodbye.
And that's the end of the podcast. Are you ready?
Yes.
3, 2, 1, go.
So our darling Feyre goes and decides to go out to the markets to try and sell her doe hide. No, the doe. No. Yeah, doe hide and, oh my god, doe hide and the wolf skin. So she goes out and she sees a really muscly lady and she's like, hey, mercenary, please can you buy my things? And she's like, I'll give you loads of money. And then Feyre gets suspicious and then the mercenary's all talking about the fairies over the wall and how things are starting to get dangerous. And she mentions that there's these evil things called Martax, who are a type of fairies who we meet later in a couple of chapters.
Do we meet the Martax?
I thought they were one of the first things we meet.
No, we meet the Naga.
Damn it. That was the worst 30-second recap ever. I think you could do much better than that.
Okay, I'm ready. Count me in.
Counting you in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so Feyre goes to the market to sell her wolf hide and her doe hide to a mercenary, but on the way she meets the Children of the Blessed, who are these stupid, like, long-haired, prancing about the place telling everyone that fairies are great and that if they go to the wall then they'll become brides of the fairies and everything will be wonderful. And Feyre's like, no, they probably got eaten. And the mercenary is really nice to her and warns her about fairies coming over the wall that shouldn't be, and gives her lots of money for the hides and helps her feed her family.
Nice.
Success.
That was beautiful.
I didn't know I was so angry about the Children of the Blessed, but they really are annoying.
Those silver bell jingling.
So my story about storytelling was about fairy tales, and I'd like to start there because, as I've already mentioned, Tamlin is from a different story. He is from this Scottish ballad about rescuing. He gets rescued by his true love from the Queen of the Fairies, which is going to be a plot point later in the books. Feyre can also be seen as a Cinderella. We said last week that she's got these sort of evil stepsisters. They're not really evil, you know. They're not very good sisters, and she does all the work and doesn't get any appreciation for it. And the last place that I saw fairy tales was Feyre's trips into the woods, because woodland is so often in fairy tales as a place of transformation or a place of danger. You know, Hansel and Gretel get taken into the woods by their parents to be killed, to be left to starve. You've got Into the Woods, which plays on the musical, which plays on that a lot. Feyre's trips into the wood do transform her because they take her from a child to a very bitter woman, you know, a woman who can kill without remorse. So I'm not saying it's a good transformative process, but it's certainly a place of transformation.
You've also got the fact that, you know, it's about fairy tales and there are fairies, literal fairies.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you want to talk about the fairies that the mercenary talks about? Because that's storytelling. And you love the muscly lady.
I do love the muscly lady. Well, I can talk about the muscly lady, but not about the fairies that she talks about. I can talk about the muscly lady herself and basically how her appearance tells a story, because she's covered with scars, she's got short hair, narrow eyes, and she looks particularly mean. And that already introduces you to the kind of person you think she's going to be. Obviously, don't judge a book by its cover and all of that, but looking at someone's appearance can give you an indication of who they are, what they've been through. People express their gender identity and their sexuality a lot of times through the way they dress. So it is an important aspect of storytelling.
I hadn't noticed that she had short hair. Yeah, her dark hair was shorn to her chin. Yeah, and she's such a mystery because Feyre arrives in the market to sell the skins, and she knows the cobbler and the clothier, and they both are like, "Oh, we're not interested in your skins," or they pretend they're not interested. So she goes for the unknown. She goes for this mysterious mercenary, and it turns out to be the right play because the mercenary gives her extra money, gives her more money than the pelts are worth as a kindness. Also gives her loads of warnings about the other types of fairies. Although my criticism of the mercenary is that she gives Feyre these frightening warnings about the Martax. Body as big as a bear's, head something like a lion, and 3 rows of teeth sharper than a shark's, which really reminded me of when people started travelling around the world and bringing back stories of creatures, but they got really garbled, which is how you end up with dragons, because they're like, oh, well, it kind of looks like this and it kind of looks like this, and you get those horrendous medieval pictures of what they thought a giraffe or a hippo looked like, and they're just wonderful. I love them so much.
It reminds me of Renaissance paintings of cats.
Yes. Oh, I love those. They're really ugly.
If you're ever feeling really sad and you want to be cheered up, just Google Renaissance paintings of cats and you'll have a good time.
But yeah, so my criticism of the mercenary is she warns Feyre about these monsters, but she doesn't tell her how to kill them. And maybe that's unfair, maybe she's like, oh, well, Feyre wouldn't know how to kill them. But she's already done it. She's already killed Andras. And so I just think that, she could have slipped in, and by the way, they're vulnerable under their chin, or something. I just think that would have been useful. And we'll see in the next chapter, a fairy will come to Feyre's house, and her instinct is to fight it. Her instinct is to try and kill it. And I just think the mercenary could have told a better story about, these are the Martaks, they're very frightening, and here's their weak spot.
Yeah, but she didn't want to create alternative business. Feyre could have become a mercenary then. That would have been good.
That's true. That's true. You don't want a competitor.
Because Feyre is a tough cookie.
She is. Yes, she could be a good mercenary.
On that point, I think it's good to discuss how storytelling plays into the area of Prythian, just in terms of they don't really have, mobile phones and computers and newsstands like we normally do. There's not really that aspect of journalism. Their storytelling is their news, and it's a good point that news is kind of like a form of storytelling. So a way that sort of falsities are put through to the Prythians are like iron, it'll protect you from fairies. All these lies come through, and they're like, oh yes, this isn't fake news. This is going to save me from fairies. In the same way that people will print articles about something and be like, so and so cheated with so and so, when they don't actually know that, and they're just making news.
Yeah, because they learn these warnings about the fairies from childhood. It's part of their schooling to learn this, but the information that they're learning is wrong. So Nesta and Elaine both have these iron bracelets that they wear, and even Isaac, Feyre's guy that she sleeps with periodically, has an iron cuff around one wrist, and he'd offered to buy her one, but she'd said no because they weren't in a relationship, and it felt too much like a gift that she couldn't accept. And I wondered about that. Why do Nesta and Elaine have one and Feyre doesn't? Feyre has the ash arrow. And do you think it's just coincidence that Feyre happens to have the thing that actually works? Ash does kill fairies, but iron doesn't affect them at all. Do you think it's just coincidence that she has something which actually... Do you think it's just a plot device that she has something that actually works?
I think that it shows that the tools you have are only useful in the right hands. So if you do not have the skills to use the tools, Ash Arrow's completely freaking useless.
But what if they had an ash bracelet? Would that have worked?
I mean, you could make friendship bracelets with it, but that probably wouldn't be very nice for the fairy, I don't think.
No. Well, that transitions nicely into the Children of the Blessed, who do not want to keep the fairies away. They want to be ruled by them again. So the fairies used to enslave humans 500 years ago, and the Children of the Blessed are like, everything was better back when we were slaves. We should be kind to our fairy overlords. Come hither. And even send up sacrifices to the wall, to the border, and send them over. I love this. This is storytelling. They sent a friend up to the border who hasn't come back. She must have been a High Fae's bride. She must have married one of the High Fae. And Nesta says she's probably been eaten. That's why she's not come back.
Either way, she was a snack.
Hey, snack with two C's. But they don't know, as you say about storytelling with news, they don't have all the information, so they can draw whatever conclusions fit their pre-existing biases. The Children of the Blessed think that the fairies are great, and Nesta thinks that they're dangerous, so they've drawn completely different conclusions.
Well, the Children of the Blessed are where we start to bring religion in it, and obviously religion as storytelling is an interesting subject. Religion is a form of storytelling, but a form of storytelling used specifically to create morals. But it's interesting that the way religion is used in this aspect, the morals are completely wrong, the religion is completely wrong, and Feyre and all of Prythian has forsaken religion and they don't believe in it anymore. And that just shows you how bad it is by how bad the Children of the Blessed are, because their storytelling is incorrect.
They even have a religious text, the Word of the Blessed. I'm saying it as blessed because the word of the blessed is just not as good. The thing that I find ironic about the Children of the Blessed and this, oh, she's my friend has been sent to the border and now she's going to be a High Fae's bride. Everyone, Feyre and her family, say, well, that's ridiculous, that's absolutely not what happened, this foreshadows Feyre's future.
That's a bit spooky, but yes, go on.
Yeah, because Feyre is going to cross the border very soon. She is going to go live in the Spring Court and she's going to fall in love with Tamlin. And then she's going to, in the second book, she's going to go to the Night Court and she's going to fall in love with Rhys. So this foreshadows her future 2 times over, that she's going to fall in love with the fairies. And everyone thinks it's completely ridiculous as a possibility, but it is going to happen.
So, in the chapter, Feyre goes and talks to the mercenary about the evil fairies, and she learns that one of the breeds of fairy, if you can call them breeds, is called the Martax. And this is a good example of learning via storytelling because obviously I don't think there's a formal education system as far as I'm aware. It's probably not for women.
No.
So this is the only way that they can get information out is via storytelling. So they're learning everything from storytelling. They're learning morals, they're learning all via storytelling. So it's really, really important.
Absolutely. And Feyre talks about the history of Prythian that she's learned through hearsay. And I really like this as an alternative to Once Upon a Time. She says she keeps repeating once, once long ago, and for millennia before that. She keeps repeating once instead of once upon a time, which I thought was quite a nice sort of storytelling device. What's weird about the rebellion against the fairies, which happened 500 years ago, so it's beyond mortal memory, but the fairies who were there, some of them are still alive today, or most of them are still alive today. The thing that we find out in a later book is that it wasn't humans rebelling against the fairies, it was humans and fairies who were allied with them rebelling against the fairies who wanted to keep them as slaves. So again, we see that the story's incomplete, that they're missing key information, that yes, fairies can be dangerous, but some of them you can trust, and some of them fought with humans.
I've just remembered that Feyre can't read, so she wouldn't be taught.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because later in the novel she learns how to read, so she literally hasn't learned anything. So storytelling and this history of Prythian has been passed down to her
Verbally, yeah.
because that's all she has.
Yeah. Yeah, I always disliked that Nesta and Elaine were older and so had learnt to read, but then hadn't told Feyre. Feyre was 8 or something when they lost their fortune, and so they just never bothered to teach her. Like, how cruel do you have to be to go, well, I have this skill that would really help you and would be a useful thing for you to have, but I'm not going to give it to you.
Well, it's not like they'd have text. Like, if nobody can read, then there would be no text about for her to learn, presumably.
Yeah, but you can write in dirt. She could still learn to form her letters in mud or with a bit of charcoal. They could have made do, and they could have taught her, but obviously they didn't.
I mean, they must have got so bored. They must have needed something to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's another use of storytelling, is when you're very bored, you tell stories to yourself to keep yourself entertained.
Which we actually do see when Isaac and Feyre are talking and they're making a little conversation. Isaac's talking about the eggs he bought at the market, they're having a little chit chat. You're filling the time. Literally, conversation is storytelling.
Yeah.
This right now is storytelling. Everything is storytelling.
I don't feel great about Isaac, because so they have sex periodically whenever they're around each other, whenever they've got time. But what Feyre says is, occasionally we talk, or rather he'd talk, and that's emphasised, he'd talk about the pressures and burdens his father placed on him. And I just got such strong mansplaining vibes of, oh, my life is so difficult. And we know that Isaac is the son of the only well-off farmer in our village. Now, he's still struggling for food, but certainly nowhere near at Feyre's level of starving to death. I just think it sounds a bit obnoxious, him being like, oh, my life, oh, I've got so many pressures and burdens upon me. And it sounds like he's not asking her reciprocally about her burdens.
I never realised until we've literally just had this conversation now that it's nothing like love, because if he had feelings for her or loved her in any way, he would be looking out for her. Like, obviously, he was going to buy the iron bracelet for her, but he'd give her food. Surely that would be the one thing.
Yeah, much more useful than an iron bracelet, and less expensive.
So, Isaac, get in the bin.
I mean, we can talk about that as well, because Feyre says that there was no love between us. At least what I assumed people meant when they talk about love. And I was thinking that I wonder if Feyre's heard romance stories whether those have been told to her. I wonder whether maybe her father's told her about her mother as a romantic story. But the difference between like lust and romance, and whether storytelling is what makes something a romance rather than a lust.
It's very easy to apply to the real world because we all hear stories about love. We watch
Mm,
rom-coms, Disney stories, and we get this expectation of romance and love. We expect it to be this magical thing. And it's not. Even reading these book series, which I love dearly, but they set up some unreasonable expectations for
mm,
relationships. And storytelling for love, obviously, it gives you hope and it can be amazing, but you have to be careful what you believe in.
yeah. Well, I mean, coming back to fairy tales, it's the prince will drop out of the sky and fall in love with you instantly story that I think is one of the most dangerous, because when has that actually happened in anybody's life ever?
Well, really, what you got to do is you got to shoot his friend,
Yeah.
skin him, and then get stolen.
Oh God, let's not. No, let's not. Let's not use that as a realistic way of getting a boyfriend. First, kill his friend, skin him, then get kidnapped, then fall in love with him under duress. Great.
And then save his life by stabbing people.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't use these books as a model for romance.
I think we should just let everybody know that we are going to see Tamlin next chapter and that he does make an appearance right at the end where he bursts into the room, which we didn't mention.
That's true. That's true. It's in the last. It's, yeah, literally the last sentence. Tamlin shows up as an enormous growling shape. So you have to wait until next chapter to see him properly.
And it'll be a great story.
Oh, will it?
No.
No, it's a kidnap.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Ruth, for talking to me about storytelling. Do you want to explain Florilegium this week?
So, how Florilegium works, an idiot's guide from Ruth, is basically we take these things called sparklets, we'll read through the chapter and pick our favourite phrase, maybe a couple of words, and we'll smush them together, mine and Kat's, and we'll read it out and gain a new meaning from the text. So, we're taking different elements of different parts of the chapter, squishing them together, and creating a whole new story from it. Mine is at least silver, possibly gold.
Ooh, okay. Where does that show up in the text?
Feyre receives the money from the mercenary, and she's talking about how her pockets are weighed down with silver and gold.
Cool.
What is your sparklet?
Oh, I'm split between two. Mine is, should they bless you with their attention? My sparklet comes from one of the children of the Blessed, who says that if the fairies were to bless you with their attention, you would happily move to beyond the wall, move to the fairy part of Prythian.
So, the two sparklets together read, should they bless you with their attention, at least silver, possibly gold. And for me, that invokes feelings of someone's attention being valuable.
Mm. But also like levels of valuable. Like some people's attention is a silver level, some people's are like a bronze medal level of attention, and some people's attention is gold levels of attention.
Some people only pay silver level attention, and some people only pay bronze level. So when you find a gold, keep it.
So you feel like that's people who pay attention to you with all of their being rather than just they're idly sitting on their phone and they're not really listening to you.
That absolutely drives me insane. I know it's such an old woman thing, but if you are talking to someone, do not be on your phone at the same time.
Is that useful at all in the text? Is there anybody whose attention who only pays silver or gold level of attention?
Isaac is silver, I think.
Ugh,
Well, he's
bronze.
Is he even on the? I don't think he's on the.
I don't know. I don't think he even gets a medal.
Yeah, he doesn't get a medal because his attention is zero. He just talks, and Feyre just goes, "Okay," well, she doesn't even say anything apparently.
Yeah,
Whereas I would say Tamlin's a silver and Reese is a gold.
yeah, yeah. I would say the dad probably pays a bit of attention, but not a lot. He doesn't really know what's going on, but he's got like a rough. He's there. He's present, but he's not necessarily listening.
When you think about it again, should they bless you with their attention,
Mm.
at least silver, possibly gold? It's saying that someone's attention is an asset.
Yeah, it's a blessing.
You are so lucky to have someone's attention because why should someone pay attention to you? And it just reminds me of the fact that Feyre is nothing right now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a toxic way of thinking about it, isn't it? Like that that it is a blessing for someone to pay attention to you because you're not interesting. And I don't think anyone does pay attention to Feyre. She does feel, she feels isolated and she feels lonely, and her family don't pay attention to her when she goes into the woods and nearly dies.
Nobody gets a medal.
No medals for anybody. Medal for Feyre, and that's it. Okay, shall we swap them around?
Hit me.
At least silver, possibly gold, should they bless you with their attention. I feel like that's someone getting paid to pay attention to you. As in, they're actually getting silver and gold coins if you pay attention to them or they pay attention to you. And that reminds me of later in the books when Feyre is taken to the Spring Court by Tamlin. Tamlin tells her that her family were taken care of, but she doesn't believe him. She thinks that means that like they get some food, but not a lot. And when she leaves the Spring Court and she comes home, she finds that Tamlin has found their fortune, has given them their fortune back. So he's gifted them all of this gold, all of this wealth, as like a, well, it's not a bribe because she doesn't know about it, but as like a guilty conscience that he's kidnapped her and then he sort of ransomed her by paying the family back the gold that they've lost.
For me, it reminds me of the fact that when she is in the relationships with the fairies or involved with the fairies, she becomes more valuable. So, should they bless you with their attention, at least silver, possibly gold, if you are in the right places and have the right contacts and the right networks, you will be given money because you'll be involved in the cool things.
Yeah, yeah, it matters. It matters who you're in relationship with and at what point in time. Yeah.
Which we see because when Feyre and her family have riches, they have all their friends who then drop them like it's hot the minute they become poor.
Well, thank you for that Florilegium. Shall we move on to blessings?
I'll let you go first because I go first every time.
Okay, I have a very specific blessing, which isn't to any of the characters that appear in the chapter, and it is to the person who invented the male birth control for Prythian. We find out that Feyre can't afford the contraceptive brew, so Isaac takes it, which means that this fantasy world has managed to invent male birth control and we haven't. So I'd like to give a blessing to whoever invented that. And it's a shame that it's not free, but they don't have an NHS, so doesn't surprise me that it's not free. But I would like to give a blessing for that inventor and a blessing to all the people that work on medicine that benefits our lives every day and we completely take them for granted. I've had my first COVID vaccine and I'm absolutely not taking it for granted, but I'm sure that people will. And obviously without that we couldn't even begin to start getting back to any sort of normal. So I want to bless the inventors out there who create things that we need every day. Thank you.
My blessing is going to be for Feyre.
Oh, we haven't blessed Feyre yet.
And we haven't, and she's our main gal. And I thought she deserves a blessing because this is where we begin to see her character development, and this is where we begin to see her learning information. And she's about to go on a wild ride. So, this is for anybody who is currently in a place in their life, like we were all before COVID, and you're about to have the rug torn out from underneath you. This is a blessing to remember where you came from, and there's probably going to be okay. Like when you go to uni and
Yeah.
you're terrified.
Yeah, I really don't envy the people who've gone to uni this year.
So if you're one of those people that's just about to have a massive fairy walk in the room and scream at you, it's gonna be okay.
Thank you for listening to A Court of Thoughts and Proses.
Please subscribe and leave a review if you've enjoyed this episode.
This episode was produced by both of us and edited by me.
You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Acotap Podcast, spelled out ACOTAP.
Thank you to the Harry Potter and the Sacred Text podcast who let us borrow their structure. Bye, see you next week.
Bye, everyone. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Acotap Codpast.
Codpast? Is that cod pasta?
What? No! Ew. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Acotap Codcast. Oh my god.
And that's a podcast about cod. A codcast.
It's a podcast about cod pasta.
Of course. How niche.
Copyrighted. No one can take our idea.